Alexander Harrison, a successful tech CEO worth millions, has built walls around his heart after a painful divorce. When famous actress Victoria Sterling approaches him at a charity gala, he coldly rejects her advances, believing all women are after his money. But fate has other plans. During a coffee shop visit, he witnesses Sarah Martinez, a struggling single mother, defending her young daughter from bullies. Something about Sarah's fierce love and genuine spirit breaks through his defenses. As their worlds collide, Alexander must choose between his protected isolation and the possibility of real love with a woman who doesn't even know who he is. I stood at the edge of the Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom, watching the city's elite mingle beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala was in full swing, and I was doing what I did best, writing checks and keeping my distance. That's what being Alexander Harrison, CEO of Technova Solutions, had taught me over the past 5 years. Money solved problems. People created them. Alexander, darling, the sultry voice belonged to Victoria Sterling, Hollywood's latest it girl. She glided toward me in a dress that probably cost more than my first car, her perfect smile gleaming under the lights. I've been hoping to catch you alone all evening. I took a sip of my whiskey, keeping my expression neutral. Victoria? She moved closer, her perfume overwhelming. I was thinking we could grab dinner sometime. I know this amazing little place in Beverly Hills. I'm not interested. The words came out flat, final. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. Excuse me? I turned to face her fully, letting the ice in my voice match the coldness I felt inside. You heard me. I'm not interested in whatever game you're playing. Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly beneath. Game? Alexander, you genuinely want access to my bank account. I set my glass down on a nearby table. Let me save you some time. I don't date actresses. I don't date anyone who sees dollar signs when they look at me. And I certainly don't date women who think batting their eyelashes is a business strategy. The color drained from her face, quickly replaced by a flush of anger. You arrogant. Honest, I corrected. The word you're looking for is honest. She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. I'd had this conversation too many times before, with socialites, actresses, gold diggers, disguised as everything from yoga instructors to veterinarians. After my ex-wife Elena walked away with half my assets and a public statement about how emotionally unavailable I was, I'd learned to spot them from a mile away. The truth was, Elena wasn't entirely wrong. I had become emotionally unavailable. It was safer that way. I made my way to the exit, nodding politely to acquaintances but not stopping to chat. The cool Manhattan air hit my face as I stepped onto Park Avenue, and I loosened my tie. My driver was waiting, but I waved him off. I'll walk tonight, Marcus. He looked concerned. Sir, it's nearly 11. I'll be fine. I needed to clear my head, to shake off the familiar anger that came with encounters like the one with Victoria. I started walking south, my Italian leather shoes clicking against the sidewalk. The city was alive around me, taxis honking, late-night diners spilling golden light onto the pavement, couples walking hand in hand. I envied them sometimes, those couples. The way they looked at each other like the other person was their whole world. I'd felt that once, or thought I had. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant. Don't forget, board meeting at 8 a.m. Quarterly reports are on your desk. Right back to reality. This was my life. Board meetings, quarterly reports, charity galas where women like Victoria Sterling saw me as a prize to be won. I'd built an empire worth $2.8 billion, but sometimes I wondered what the point was. I had everything money could buy, and nothing that actually mattered. I turned the corner onto a quieter street, past a small coffee shop that was somehow still open despite the late hour. Through the window I could see a woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wiping down tables. She moved with tired efficiency, the kind that spoke of long days and longer nights. Something made me stop and look closer. Maybe it was the way she paused for a moment, pressing her hand to her lower back as if it ached. Maybe it was the gentle smile she gave to the elderly man at the corner table as she refilled his coffee. There was something genuine about her movements, something real in a world full of people performing roles. I almost kept walking, almost, but then she looked up, and our eyes met through the glass. For a split second, there was no recognition in her gaze, no calculating assessment of my net worth, no sudden brightening that meant she'd recognized me from Forbes or the society pages. Just a brief, tired smile before she looked away. It was such a small thing, but it stopped me cold. When was the last time someone had looked at me and seen just a person? I stood there on the sidewalk like an idiot, staring through the window of a coffee shop at a woman I didn't even know. The rational part of my brain, the part that had built my fortune, told me to keep walking, to go home to my penthouse apartment, review tomorrow's presentations, and forget about tired eyes and genuine smiles, but I didn't move. Instead, I found myself thinking about Victoria Sterling's calculating gaze, about Elena's final words during our divorce. You don't know how to let anyone get close, Alexander. You think everyone's trying to use you, so you use them first. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had become exactly what she accused me of being. But standing here watching this unknown woman clean tables with the same care she probably gave to everything in her life, I wondered if it was too late to be someone different. The coffee shop's neon sign flickered. Rosie's Corner Cafe, always open for you. Always open. What a concept. The next morning came too early, as it always did. I sat through the board meeting on autopilot, nodding at the right moments while quarterly projections flashed across the conference room screen. My mind kept drifting back to the coffee shop, to tired eyes and a genuine smile. It was ridiculous. I didn't even know her name. Alexander, my CFO, Robert Chen, was staring at me expectantly. Your thoughts on the Seattle expansion? I straightened, forcing myself back into CEO mode. Move forward with phase 1. Schedule a site visit for next week. The meeting dragged on for another hour. Profit margins, market penetration, competitive analysis, the language of my world. By the time it ended, I'd almost convinced myself that last night had been nothing more than post-gala fatigue affecting my judgment. Almost. At noon, I found myself walking toward Rosie's Corner Cafe. I told myself it was just convenient. I had a lunch meeting that got cancelled and I needed caffeine. The fact that I'd walked 12 blocks out of my way was irrelevant. The cafe looked different in daylight, smaller somehow. The paint on the door was chipped and the sidewalk outside could have used repair, but the smell of fresh coffee and something sweet, maybe cinnamon rolls, drew me in. She was there, behind the counter this time, her dark hair caught in the same practical ponytail. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd first thought, maybe late 20s. There were laugh lines around her eyes, but also the kind of tiredness that sleep couldn't fix. "What can I get you?" she asked, and her voice had a slight accent, something musical that might have been Mexican or Colombian. "Just coffee, black." I studied her face, looking for any sign of recognition. Nothing. "Coming right up." She turned to the coffee machine, moving with the same efficient grace I'd noticed the night before. "You want a muffin with that? They're fresh this morning." "I'm fine, thanks." She poured the coffee into a paper cup and handed it to me. Our fingers brushed for just a moment. Hers were warm, with small calluses that spoke of hard work. "That'll be $2.50. I handed her a 20, then surprised myself by saying, "Keep the change." Her eyes widened slightly. "Sir, that's way too much." "It's fine." She hesitated, looking like she wanted to argue but needed the money too badly to refuse. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Really?" I nodded and turned to leave, but a commotion outside stopped me. Through the window, I could see a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, backing away from 3 older kids. They had her cornered against a parked car, and even through the glass, I could see she was crying. The woman behind the counter, Sarah, according to her name tag, had seen it too. The coffee cup slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor as she rushed toward the door. "Mia!" she called, bursting outside. "Déjà en passe." I followed without thinking, stepping onto the sidewalk just as Sarah positioned herself between her daughter and the bullies. The little girl, Mia, immediately wrapped herself around her mother's legs, still crying. "What's the problem here?" Sarah's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. The biggest of the 3 kids, a boy who couldn't have been more than 10, sneered. "Your kid's weird, she talks funny." "She speaks 2 languages, Sarah said, her voice getting sharper. "That makes her smart, not weird." "My dad says people like you should go back where you came from," the boy continued, emboldened by his friend's snickers. The temperature dropped about 20 degrees in my chest. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. "Is there a problem here?" The kids looked up at me, 6 feet 2 inches of barely controlled anger in a $3,000 suit. The little ringleader's bravado evaporated instantly. "No, sir," he mumbled. "Good." I kept my voice level, but let just enough ice creep in to make my point. "Because picking on little girls isn't very brave, is it? In fact, it's pretty pathetic." The boys scattered like roaches when the lights come on. I watched them go, making sure they were really gone before turning back to Sarah and Mia. Sarah was kneeling next to her daughter, wiping tears from the little girl's cheeks and whispering in Spanish. Mia had stopped crying, but she kept looking over at me with wide, curious eyes. "Thank you," Sarah said, standing up. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." The words came out more forcefully than I intended. "Nobody should have to deal with that garbage." She studied my face for a long moment, and I had the strangest feeling she was seeing something I usually kept hidden. "I'm Sarah Martinez," she said finally. "This is my daughter, Mia. Alexander." I almost added my last name out of habit, then stopped. Alexander Harrison. If the name meant anything to her, she didn't show it. Instead, she looked down at Mia, who was still clinging to her leg. "Can you say thank you to Mr. Alexander, baby?" Mia peeked out from behind her mother. "Thank you," she whispered, then added something in Spanish that made Sarah smile. "She says you're very tall," Sarah translated. I found myself smiling back, actually smiling, not the practiced corporate expression I usually wore. "Tell her she's very brave," Sarah translated, and Mia giggled, some of the fear finally leaving her eyes. "We should get back inside," Sarah said. "I still have 4 hours left on my shift." "You work here full-time?" "Here and at the diner on 5th Street. Mia comes with me after school." She paused, looking embarrassed. "Childcare is expensive." I thought about the 20 I'd given her earlier, about the way she'd hesitated to take it, about the calluses on her hands and the tired lines around her eyes. This woman was working 2 jobs just to get by, and she was still one of the most genuine people I'd met in years. If this part of Sarah's strength also touched your heart, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to this story. "Well," I heard myself saying, "I should probably get back to work too." But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the image of Sarah Martinez standing between her daughter and the world's cruelty, ready to fight with nothing but love and determination. For the first time in 5 years, I found myself wanting to know more about someone who wasn't trying to impress me. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah Martinez. For 3 days, I found myself walking past Rosie's Corner Cafe during lunch breaks, telling myself I was just getting some air. Each time, I caught glimpses of her through the window, serving customers, wiping tables, always with that same quiet efficiency. Mia was usually there too, sitting at a corner table doing homework or coloring in a worn book. On Thursday afternoon, I finally worked up the courage to go inside again. "The usual?" Sarah asked with a small smile that made something warm unfurl in my chest. "Actually," I surprised myself by saying, "what do you recommend?" Her face lit up. "Well, if you want something special, I make a café con leche that my grandmother taught me. It's not on the menu, but I'd like to try it." While she prepared the drink, I watched her hands move with practiced precision. She was humming something under her breath, a melody I didn't recognize but that sounded like sunshine. "Here," she slid the cup across the counter. "Fair warning, it's sweet." I took a sip and nearly groaned with pleasure. It was perfect, rich, creamy, with hints of cinnamon and something else I couldn't identify. "This is incredible. What's your secret?" "Vanilla bean and a tiny bit of brown sugar," she said, looking pleased. "And good coffee, of course. Most places cut corners, but Mr. Rossetti, he's the owner. He insists on quality beans." "How long have you worked here?" 2 years. She leaned against the counter, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked relaxed. "It's good work. Steady. And Rossetti lets me bring Mia after school, which is..." She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "Which is important," I finished. She nodded. "Not everyone understands that being a single parent means making compromises." "How old is Mia?" 6. She'll be 7 next month." Sarah's whole face softened when she talked about her daughter. "She's so smart, Alexander. She's already reading chapter books, and she can do math problems that give me headaches. Sometimes I think she got all the brains in the family." I found myself smiling. Something tells me that's not true. Before Sarah could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Mia burst in, her backpack bouncing as she ran to her mother. "Mummy, guess what happened at school today?" "English, baby," Sarah reminded her gently. "We have a customer." Mia looked over at me and waved shyly. "Hi, Mr. Alexander." "Hi, Mia. How was school?" "Good. I got a gold star on my spelling test. All 20 words." She beamed with pride, and I felt something twist in my chest. When was the last time I'd been that excited about anything? "That's amazing. You're very smart." "Mommy says smart is good, but kind is better." Mia climbed onto a stool next to the counter. "Are you kind, Mr. Alexander?" The question caught me off guard. In my world, people asked if you were successful, wealthy, connected. No one asked if you were kind. I try to be," I said finally. "Good. Mommy says mean people have hurt hearts, and that makes me sad. Sarah's cheeks flushed. Mia, why don't you start your homework while I finish working? As Mia settled at her usual table, Sarah turned back to me with an apologetic look. Sorry, she's very direct. She's wonderful, and I meant it. There was something about Mia's openness, her innocent curiosity about the world, that made me remember what it felt like to believe in goodness. Over the next hour, I found myself lingering at the counter, nursing my café con leche and talking with Sarah during the lulls between customers. I learned that she was 28, originally from Guatemala, and had been in New York for 8 years. She'd worked as a translator before Mia was born, but the hours hadn't been compatible with single motherhood. What about Mia's father? I asked, then immediately wished I could take it back. Sorry, that's too personal. Sarah's expression darkened slightly. He's not in the picture. His choice. The pain in her voice made me want to find the guy and explain a few things to him about responsibility and honor. Instead, I just said, his loss. She looked at me with surprise, then something that might have been gratitude. That's what my friend Carmen always says. Carmen sounds smart. She is. She also thinks I work too much and don't date enough. Sarah laughed, but there was something self-conscious about it. She keeps threatening to set me up with her cousin Miguel. An unexpected surge of jealousy hit me. And what do you think about that? I think I don't have time for complications. She glanced over at Mia, who was tongue-deep in concentration over her math worksheet. My life is good the way it is. Simple. Simple. It was a foreign concept to me. My life was anything but simple. Board meetings, investment portfolios, social obligations, legal teams, security details. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to. Mummy, Mia called from her table. I don't understand this problem. 1 second, baby. Sarah started to move toward her daughter, but I stood up. Mind if I take a look? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. I walked over to Mia's table and sat down across from her. She was working on word problems, the kind that would have been easy for me but were clearly challenging for a 6-year-old. Okay, I said, looking at the worksheet. Let's see what we're dealing with. The problem involved apples and sharing, basic division disguised as a story. I explained it step by step, watching Mia's face light up as understanding dawned. Oh, she said, so each person gets 5 apples. Exactly. You just needed to think about it differently. If you want to keep hearing stories like this, tap the red button that says subscribe. It's free and it helps me keep sharing. We worked through 2 more problems together, and by the time Sarah's shift ended, Mia was tackling the math with confidence. Thank you, Sarah said as she gathered her things. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, and it was true. Sitting at that small table, helping a little girl with homework while her mother counted tips, it was the most real I'd felt in years. As they prepared to leave, Mia tugged on my sleeve. Mr. Alexander, will you be here tomorrow? I looked at Sarah, who was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Yeah, I said, I'll be here. A week later, I was sitting at what had become my table in Rosie's Corner Cafe, helping Mia with her reading homework. It had become our routine. I'd arrive around 4, order Sarah's café con leche, and spend the next 2 hours in a world that felt more real than any boardroom I'd ever occupied. The brave knight protected the village, Mia read slowly, sounding out each syllable. Perfect. What do you think happened next? Maybe he married the princess and they had a big party with cake. Mia's eyes sparkled with imagination. I glanced over at Sarah, who was restocking the pastry case. She caught my eye and smiled, the kind of smile that had started appearing more frequently over the past week. It was warmer now, less guarded, and it did things to my chest that I wasn't quite ready to analyze. Mr. Alexander, Mia said, pulling my attention back. Do you have a princess? The question hit me like a brick. No, sweetheart. No princess. Why not? You're nice and tall and you smell good. Sarah laughed from behind the counter. Mia, that's not how it works. But in stories, real life is different from stories, baby. Sarah's voice was gentle, but I caught something underneath it, a sadness that spoke of her own disappointments. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer handbag that cost more than Sarah probably made in a month. She looked around the cafe with barely concealed disdain before her eyes landed on me. My blood ran cold. Jennifer Walsh, socialite, board member's wife, and Manhattan gossip queen. Alexander Harrison, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I couldn't believe it when Margaret said she saw you in here. Whatever are you doing in this charming little place? I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body tense. Behind the counter, Sarah had gone very still. "Jennifer, I was just telling the girls at the club. Imagine, our Alexander slumming it in coffee shops." She looked pointedly at Sarah, then at Mia. "Though I suppose everyone needs a little charity work." The word charity hit Sarah like a slap. I watched the warmth drain from her face, replaced by a carefully neutral mask I recognized from my own mirror. "Actually," I said, my voice deadly quiet, "I was just leaving." I pulled out my wallet and dropped a 50 on Mia's table. "For the homework help," I said, not meeting Sarah's eyes. I walked out without looking back, leaving behind Jennifer's satisfied smirk and the sound of Mia asking her mother why the nice man had left so suddenly. That night, I stood in my penthouse apartment, staring out at the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below me. Millions of lights, millions of lives I was disconnected from by money and fear and my own cowardice. My phone rang. Robert Chen. "Boss, I've got the Henderson contract ready for your signature, and there's been an issue with the Seattle property." "Not now, Robert." "But sir, this is time sensitive." I said not now. I hung up and threw the phone onto my Italian leather couch. What was I doing? Playing house with a coffee shop waitress and her daughter. Jennifer was right. We were from different worlds. I was Alexander Harrison, CEO of a billion-dollar company. Sarah was everything I wanted but couldn't have without destroying it. The next morning, I didn't go to the cafe, or the morning after that. By the third day, I'd almost convinced myself I was doing the right thing. I buried myself in work, took meetings back to back, reviewed quarterly projections until my eyes burned. This was my life. This was who I was. But Friday evening found me walking past Rosie's Corner Cafe despite myself. Through the window, I could see Sarah behind the counter, helping the last few customers of the day. Mia was at her usual table, but instead of homework, she was drawing with crayons. I should have kept walking. Instead, I pushed open the door. Sarah looked up, and for a moment something like relief flashed across her face before she schooled her features into polite professionalism. "Coffee?" she asked. "Sarah, "One coffee, black," she said firmly, turning to the machine. Mia looked up from her drawing and waved. "Mr. Alexander, I missed you. Look what I made." She held up her artwork, a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures standing together. One was tall with dark hair, one had a ponytail, and one was small with pigtails. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, "My friends." The drawing hit me harder than any board presentation, any profit report, any merger agreement ever had. "Mia made that on Tuesday," Sarah said quietly, setting the coffee in front of me. "She asked every day when you were coming back." The shame was overwhelming. "Sarah, about the other day, you don't owe me an explanation." Her voice was calm, but I could see the hurt she was trying to hide. "I understand how this works." "No, you don't." I took a deep breath. "That woman, Jennifer, she's from my world. And in my world, I'm not just Alexander. I'm Alexander Harrison, CEO of Technova Solutions. I'm worth $8 billion, and I've spent the last 5 years watching people pretend to care about me when all they really see is a bank account." Sarah's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't step back. "And you thought I was—" "No," the word came out forcefully. "That's just it. You're the first person in 5 years who's looked at me and seen just a person." And when Jennifer showed up with her implications and her judgment, I panicked. I thought if you knew who I really was, if you knew about the money and the company and all the baggage that comes with it, you'd see me differently. "So you ran away." "I ran away," I admitted. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing. Behind us, Mia continued coloring, humming the same tune I'd heard her mother humming that first day. "Alexander," Sarah said finally, "do you think I care how much money you have? Most people do. I'm not most people." She leaned against the counter, studying my face. "You helped my daughter with bullies. You spend your afternoons helping her with homework. You treat both of us with kindness and respect. That's who you are to me. The rest is just noise. What comes next is even stronger. And to not miss the ending, tap the subscribe button now. It's free, and you'll be with me in every new story." I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been locked away for so long I'd forgotten it existed. "I'm scared," I said quietly. "Of what?" "Of caring about someone who might leave." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. My ex-wife, Elena, she took half my assets and told the press I was emotionally unavailable. She wasn't wrong. I built walls because it was easier than risking getting hurt again. Sarah's expression softened. "Alexander, I work 2 jobs to support my daughter. I drive a 15-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles on it. I buy groceries with coupons and shop for clothes at thrift stores. If I wanted your money, don't you think there would be easier ways to get it? She had a point, a very good point. Besides, she continued with a small smile, you've seen me at my most unglamorous, covered in coffee stains, dealing with difficult customers, breaking up fights between 6-year-olds. If that hasn't scared you away, I think we're probably okay. Mummy, Mia called from her table. Can Mr. Alexander see my drawing? Of course, baby. I walked over and knelt down next to Mia's chair. Up close, I could see she'd added details to the drawing. The tall figure was wearing a tie, the woman had an apron, and the little girl was holding what looked like a book. It's us, Mia said proudly. You're teaching me to read, and Mummy is making coffee, and we're all happy. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Are you going to come back tomorrow? She asked, her big brown eyes serious. I have new homework and it's really hard. I looked up at Sarah, who was watching us with an expression that made my heart do complicated things. Yeah, I said, I'm going to come back. Promise? I promise. Mia beamed and threw her arms around my neck. Over her shoulder, I met Sarah's eyes. This is complicated, I said quietly. The best things usually are, she replied. As I walked home that night, Mia's drawing carefully tucked into my jacket pocket, I realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or market projections or board meetings. I was thinking about a little girl who drew pictures of friendship and a woman who made coffee taste like home. I was thinking about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than just Alexander Harrison, CEO. Maybe I could be someone worth caring about, not for what I had, but for who I was. And for the first time since Elena left, that felt like enough. The walls I'd built around my heart weren't going to come down overnight. But as I looked up at the Manhattan skyline from the sidewalk, instead of from behind bulletproof glass, I thought maybe they didn't have to be quite so high. Maybe they didn't have to be there at all.